Hello, everyone. We will be presenting Jean Rhys's novel, Voyage in the Dark. Within this novel, we are introduced to a class of women fighting for survival in a society in which they are replaceable and disposable. Voyage in the Dark is a modern fiction that uses innovative first-person narrative to bring the reader into the thoughts and feelings of a young lady in post-war Britain. The majority of conflicts within this text stem from the surplus woman problem, leaving women to fend for themselves after the large loss of men in the First World War. This novel displays the lengths one will go to fit into a society that bases women's worth not on who they are, but on the clothing that they wear and the things that they own. Anna takes advantage of what little she has in order to survive. As a result of this, Anna suffers the consequences with no help from society. First, Karey will be discussing the effects of the Great War and more specifically the surplus women problem. Karey will also be discussing Anna's struggles with identity and the loss of value women experienced as a result of the surplus women problem. Secondly, Abby will be discussing failure as feminism and the rejection of the ideal English woman, meaning the rejection of unrealistic expectations of women. And lastly, Amy will be discussing consumption and the birth control crisis for women at this time. Jean Rhys's Voyage in the Dark is her attempt to show the problems of the patriarchal society in 1920s Britain, in which the most vulnerable of Britain's surplus women continually fail to live up to modern standards.
In Muriel Tabo and the Society for the Overseas Settlement for British Women, 1919 to 1937, Bonnie White points out that immigration helped to alleviate concerns about Britain's surplus woman following the loss of a generation of young men, resulting in an increased number of unmarried women as well as a worrisome number of women who were economically dependent on their families or state. During World War I, women had stepped into male roles to keep Britain functioning. But as the war ended, women were expected to surrender their new independence and return to their pre-war roles as homemakers and dependents. A problem facing Britain, however, was that with the death of the Great War, women far outnumbered the men who came home. The male-supported economy could no longer support all the women. At the time, many described this issue as the surplus women problem, and some groups, like the Society for the Overseas Settlement of British Women, attempted to send educated middle-class women to the British satellite dominions to work in domestic roles. For the women who could not immigrate, there was great limitations. Uneducated, poorly connected, and trapped in a cycle of poverty, the women of Anna Morgan's community were at great disadvantage. While remembering her time in the West Indies, Anna Morgan thinks, "I wanted to be Black. I always wanted to be Black. Being Black is warm and gay. Being white is cold and sad." Anna hates being despised as a minority, and she longs to be valued in a community of the majority. She sees being Black as fitting in, and Anna wants to fit in, but she finds it difficult in the role that she is expected. As Anna is thinking of Francine, a favorite person from her childhood, she thinks, "Of course she disliked me because I was white. I hated being white. Being white and getting like Hester and all the things you get, old and sad and everything." When she migrates to the motherland, Anna travels against the flow of outgoing women, and she finds herself in a community with few prospects for working class women, although Anna is now amongst the majority. She is confused because this majority is not warm and gay. Anna is still cold and sad. She began life as a middle-class minority in the Indies, and in England, she is amongst the lower-class majority, fighting to gain support. The surplus women problem causes other problems for Anna and her companions. Besides the lack of employment and support, women lost much of their value overall, and in many cases, they became a cheap commodity. Maud says to Anna, "Do you know what a man said to me the other day? He said, 'Have you ever thought that a girl's clothes cost more than the girl inside of them?' Men find women to be so great in abundance that their value is lowered. This causes much problem for Anna and her community of women who depend on the patronage of men for their survival. Maud and Anna discuss Maud's patron Viv, and Maud explains, "We go to his house or different places. He has never been here at all." Viv does not get involved in Maud's personal life, and this makes sense if his attitude is that she is not to be in his life permanently. Who wants to know where their beef comes from when it's going to be gone as fast as it can be devoured? Some of Anna's contemporaries realize the position they're in, and they set themselves up to be commodified. Laurie has an apartment in which she entertains patrons whom she knows will be temporary. She goes into the business of selling herself and has connections with like-minded individuals and services to support her trade. Laurie invites Anna on to a night out with two Americans, and after the men evaluate Anna, one says, "She's all right, but I like that other kid, the dark one." This scene with Laurie shows that women will even encourage the commodification of their own sex to gain support from men, and she has a surplus of prospective women to exploit.
Throughout the novel, Anna rejects the status quo wherever she is. First, she rejects Hester's influence, while Hester serves in the novel as a symbol of the ideal English woman. Hester tried to teach Anna to talk like a lady and not like an N-word, and of course she couldn't do it. As well, Anna fails her work as a chorus girl and quits. Within her search for identity, Anna tries and fails to fit in. It is within this failure that Jean Rhys critiques the society Anna is trying to succeed in. Due to patriarchy, limited social mobility, and the surplus of women, Anna cannot succeed. In Anne Cunningham's article, Get On or Get Out, Failure and Negative Femininity in Jean Rhys's Voyage in the Dark, she argues that Anna and her community of women have a tenuous relationship to the dominant order, and that their failure to achieve material success is, at the same time, a rejection of that normalized mode of success, and effectively calls into question the terrorizing logic of capitalist and patriarchal ideology. Anna questions, "My God, this is a funny way to live. My God, how did this happen?" Which shows that she seems unable to control her circumstances, or even that she fails to recognize the actions that get her to that point. Further on in the novel, we again see Anna reflecting on her life when she says, I fell for a hell of a long time then," which is when she apparently recognizes that she is failing and has been for a long time. At this point, Anna begins to embrace her failure when she gives up and starts seeing many men. Cunningham discusses the use of shadow feminism with Jean Rhys's novel as a tool to help reframe negative traits such as passivity and failure as active processes of critique. This feminism, grounded in failing and forgetting, is particularly useful in the ongoing effort to situate Rhys's female protagonists within a feminist project. The prevalence of reductive readings that conflate Rhys's biography with her fiction allies her significance to modernist, feminist, and post-colonial studies. At the end of the novel, following a botched abortion that nearly ends Anna's life, the doctor says, "She'll be all right, ready to start all over again in no time, I've no doubt." And then in the last paragraph, when we return to Anna's stream of consciousness narrative voice, pondering repeatedly the idea of all over again, it is at this point that the reader, the protagonist, and the doctor realize that Anna will always continue down the same path, always failing. This encapsulates the failure of Anna as a reflection of the limited options she had within her society and community.
With the surplus of women following the war, many women had to find a means of making money. Anna could not support herself being a chorus girl, and she turned to escorting after she experienced the financial gains. Michael Carolyn's The Conspicuous Body, Capitalism, Consumerism, Class, and Consumption portrays how living in a modern capitalist society causes a diluted mindset, that material goods equate to worthiness. Anna experiences this. Clothes play an important role on her self-worth. She is used to looking in mirrors and seeing herself unworthy. But after her experience of buying clothes with excess money, she goes out into the street and notices that everything looks different, just as a reflection in the looking glass is different from the real thing. The 1920s were a time of consumerism, and people were spending much more than they could afford on material goods to make themselves appear worthy in a society focused on class and appearance. Carolyn writes about an era where surrounding oneself with nice things is becoming increasingly insufficient for our modern sensibilities in our quest to display status and power. Rather, we are progressively striving to become the nice thing itself. In those moments of purchases and wearing clothes that were originally out of her means, Anna felt like that nice thing that society expected of women. She felt her status grow, her problems fade away, and her original thought of herself leading a beastly life would now be a distant memory as she started believing it was a new beginning where she would go to all the lovely places she'd ever dreamt of. Society intended to push products on women. However, some products were not openly available. Birth control was not easily accessible, and abortions were illegal. It was not until the mid-20th century that effective birth control became readily available, and therefore conception was the uncontrollable risk of having sex. Here at Cook's article, Sexuality and Contraception in Modern England, Doing the History of Reproductive Sexuality, centers on sexuality and reproduction in the 20th century, a commonality shared with Voyage, where Anna succumbs to a life of prostitution to get by, resulting in an unplanned pregnancy. Cook brings awareness to the fact that the consequences of opposite sex sexual activity are different for men and for women. Therefore, sexuality is inherently and biologically gendered. Walter Jeffreys moves from girl to girl with no real consequence, and when he is done with them, he simply gives them a sum of money to end their arrangement. We know that Walter had a mistress prior to Anna, just as there will likely be another one after her. Yet Jeffreys will face no consequences for his actions, because, as Cook points out, wealthy men could afford to pay for their pleasures. His conscience remains clear because he is helping support these women. In this patriarchal society, women were considered disposable, and Anna Morgan is Rhys's perfect example as she is used and then disposed of by Walter and others. From Cook's article, we know that with sex twice a week, there was a 90% chance of becoming pregnant. So the chance of Anna getting pregnant without birth control is high, and when that happens, she is left alone to deal with it. Anna has no support from her family, no support from the potential father, nor from society as a whole. Cook suggests that in a culture without access to reliable, safe birth control, coitus carries a risk of greater economic and social consequences than any other act, mostly for women. Anna's consequential pregnancy and abortion are a good example. Anna thinks about keeping the baby, but knows the status it would bear her and that she cannot afford to keep it. She has to turn back to Walter for financial support for her abortion, and with a lack of jobs for women, it is likely that she will return to her old life.
Voyage in the Dark is a critique of post-war Britain and its treatment of women. This novel gives readers the experience of this era through the eyes of Anna Morgan, a young woman struggling with her sense of identity and sense of home. Anna feels as though she is an outcast in her own home of the Caribbean based on the color of her skin. Though when she migrates to the motherland of Britain, the feeling of outcast follows her. Anna is outcast from the upper class and struggles to survive in a post-industrial, post-war capitalist society. This novel sheds light on a society that considers its women to be surplus commodities. In World War I, a large population of men lost their lives, and as a result of this, Britain was left with a surplus of women. When Anna attempts to migrate into Britain, she finds herself living amongst women who will use any tool at their disposal to survive. Women are made to feel as though their value is based upon the clothing that they wear. While the women in this text are continually kept low, they still want what the higher class is trying to sell them. Anna is compelled to spend, and she is compelled to want what she cannot afford. As a result, turns to escorting. These women use what they have, that being their bodies, as a means to survive. In doing so, Anna rejects the ideal English woman. This stands as a rejection of unrealistic expectations of women. Women were not provided proper health care, birth control was not easily accessible, and abortions were illegal. This is just another example of women being left at a disadvantage in society. Without access to proper health care regarding women's reproductive systems, chances of unwanted pregnancies were high and abortions could only be accessed on the black market. Women felt that this was their only option based on their circumstances. These procedures were dangerous and put women's lives at high risk. Overall, women could not get ahead without the help of a male companion. Women were forced into vulnerable roles and were not provided the proper tools from society. Therefore, they were not given the opportunity to live up to modern standards. And these are our sources. Thank you for watching.